Chapter 1. The Invisible Years. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, and made myself small enough, my family would finally see me. But some people never notice what they never planned to hold. My name is Elara Whitmore, and I spent 3 decades being the girl trimmed out of family photos, the daughter praised for her independence only because it excused everyone else's neglect. I built a career predicting how coastlines collapse, never realizing my own foundation was breaking the same way. I thought the worst thing my sister ever took from me was my childhood. I was wrong. She tried to take my wedding, my work, and the last fragile pieces of my future. And when she did, something in me stopped collapsing. Something in me finally learned to rise. What happened next wasn't revenge. It was the moment the world saw the truth my family had buried for years. I was 30 when I finally admitted to myself that my family had spent most of my life looking straight through me. That truth did not arrive all at once. It showed up in pieces, the same way the Pacific breaks down a cliff, a little at a time until the shape is completely different, and you wonder when the erosion began. I grew up in Santa Cruz in a yellow house that always smelled faintly like sunscreen and laundry sheets. My sister Sierra was the bright one, the one who moved like a spark through every room. My mother, Linda, called her our sunshine girl and said it with a kind of reverence, as if Sierra had been handpicked by the universe. My father, Victor, was quieter, but he always followed my mother's lead. If she adored something, he adored it too. If she wanted calm, he delivered silence. If she wanted the world framed around Sierra, he adjusted the picture without hesitation. I learned early that I was easier to manage when I stayed still, easier to love by being low maintenance. The more invisible I became, the smoother the household ran. At least that is what it felt like. In 2005, my mother wanted a family picture for a holiday card. I remember standing next to the fireplace in a dress that made my skin itch. Sierra posed right in the center with her chin tilted up like she was greeting the camera. When the photo returned from the drugstore print lab, I saw it on the mantle, but not the version I remembered. My figure was cut out entirely, a thin slice missing from the right side of the frame. You could still find the frayed line of the scissors if you pressed your nose close to the glass. My mother said she had just wanted a cleaner shot. I nodded because arguing never changed anything. Inside, I felt something fold in on itself. A year later, on my 13th birthday, I begged for a lighthouse cake. I even drew it, with the railing at the top and the black stripes around the tower. When I came home from school, the kitchen table held a pink ballet cake with tiny plastic slippers. Sierra squealed because she thought it was for her. My mother laughed and told me the bakery had mixed up the order, but this one looked adorable and Sierra loved it. I stared at the frosting. I could not find any part of myself in it. By 2010, I won a regional science competition with a project tracking coastal erosion. It was the first time something felt like mine. I texted the family chat on the bus ride home, feeling like maybe they would see me this time. My message sat unread while the chat filled with photos of Sierra trying on glitter dresses for yet another recital. I kept the certificate folded in my backpack the whole ride. The only person who asked about my project was my grandmother, Ruth. She lived in a small apartment behind a bakery on Pacific Avenue. When I visited, she pulled out a thrift store frame and placed my certificate inside it with gentle hands. Then she opened a drawer full of old photos, the original versions before my mother trimmed them. She would tap the images softly and say, "There you are, right in the middle where you belong." I do not remember her ever criticizing my mother directly. She simply kept the truth for me in case I needed it. I left for UC Santa Barbara in 2012. I packed everything I owned into my beat-up Civic and drove down the coast feeling like I was crossing a border. I still visited home, but something in me loosened the moment I stepped on campus. I liked the sound of the ocean mixed with the hum of students. I liked that no one knew who was supposed to be the favorite or the forgotten one. During orientation, I met Kai Rivera after we both got lost looking for an engineering seminar. He had a habit of pausing before speaking, as if he wanted every word to matter. A week later, I ran into a biology major named Talia Chen in the library when we reached for the same field guide. She laughed first and apologized after, then invited me to join her study group. The three of us worked well together. None of us were loud. We liked the same corners of the lab. We all believed the coastline deserved better than what it was getting. One night during sophomore year, Kai sketched the outline of a small drone on a sheet of notebook paper, something that could fly along the shore and scan cliffs before they collapsed. I leaned closer and adjusted the angles. Talia added notes about water sensors and soil analysis. That sketch became our capstone idea. We named the prototype the Current Wing. The first time it made it through an entire loop without crashing, I screamed so loud that a couple walking their dog turned around. In the winter of our senior year, we were encouraged to apply for a campus innovation grant. It was more money than any of us had seen and could pay for several new prototypes. Winning it required presenting to a panel of faculty and a visiting investor named Brian Mercer, who had funded a few clean tech startups in the Bay Area. I remember the nerves the night before. I practiced our pitch in my tiny campus apartment until my throat felt raw. I texted my mother that we had a big day in the morning. Her only reply came hours later. It was a picture of Sierra in a sequin dress standing under a chandelier. When the panel came in, Brian Mercer took the center seat. He looked at our names on the opening slide and turned almost entirely to Kai. Every time I explained a section of the flight algorithm, he gave a brief nod and shifted back to address Kai directly. When I expanded on our erosion model, he glanced at his watch. At one moment, he interrupted to ask Talia about nonprofit partnerships as if he had forgotten I had been speaking. Kai repeatedly redirected credit back to me, but it never stuck. When the pitch ended, he shook Kai's hand firmly and told him he had leadership potential. Then he turned to me with a thin, polite smile and said it was nice to see more young women showing interest in science. It landed like a dismissal rather than praise. We did not get the grant. We walked across campus in silence. The sky hung heavy and gray. Talia finally muttered a curse and asked how I wasn't screaming. Kai kept repeating that it was unfair, that we had done everything right. I felt a familiar burn in my ribs, the same one I used to feel when I saw my cropped-out reflection on the mantel at home, the same sense of being overlooked even while standing there in plain sight. That night, we sat in the engineering lab long after the building closed. While Kai vented and Talia tried to rally us, I pulled out a fresh notebook. I listed every part we'd need, every beach we could test without permits, every coastal town losing land to rising tides. I thought about all the years I had waited for someone else to choose me. Near midnight, I wrote the words "Blue Current" at the top of the page. I did not know exactly how we'd build the company or whether anyone would ever see the worth in what we were doing. I only knew that this time, I wasn't waiting for a grant panel or a family member or anyone else to hand me a place in the frame. I was going to build one myself. Chapter 2. The Day They Chose Her. The morning I woke up in 2024 and realized Blue Current had officially made it through 8 unpredictable years, something inside me settled in a way I had never felt before. We were still small, but we were standing on our own feet. After the Coastal Innovation Grant in 2021 and the Monterey Climate Lab contract the following year, our little company had grown into something real. It felt like a good time to build something else that was real too, which is why Kai and I decided that summer would be our wedding. Nothing grand, nothing staged, just a small ceremony on the coast with the people who had stayed in my life for reasons that had nothing to do with convenience or show. We picked a weekend in late July and started planning in the quiet way we did most things. Talia immediately offered to handle anything involving schedules because she trusted neither of us with dates or spreadsheets. Arya insisted on making a playlist, and Eli wanted to write a song, even though he admitted it might never get past one verse. I remember sitting in our small office in Santa Cruz, looking at the preliminary guest list and feeling a warmth I was not used to. 25 names, all chosen. No one on that list was there out of obligation. No one was there because they shared my last name. When it came time to tell my family, I waited until a Sunday afternoon when I knew my mother would be home from her event planning job. She answered on the third ring, her voice bright and clipped like she was halfway between errands. I told her we had picked a date and were keeping things simple, a small coastal ceremony, just the people who mattered. She said something like, "That sounds nice, honey," and I heard someone laugh in the background. She covered the phone with her hand, and when she came back, her tone was even thinner. "Your sister is meeting with a vendor," she said. "Sorry, it is loud in here." I tried again. "We would love to have you there." The call went quiet for a second, then she said, "Let me check with your dad and with Sierra. Things are a little chaotic right now." I hung up, feeling the familiar weight settle on my ribs. A few minutes later, Sierra sent a text. "Congrats, I guess. Busy planning my engagement stuff. We'll look at your date later." I stared at those words until they blurred. It was a habit I had never broken, trying to decipher what was intentional and what was simply careless. I told myself she was stressed. I told myself it was fine. A week passed, and the only updates I got from the Whitmore side of things were photos of Sierra tasting cakes or holding up white dresses in boutiques across San Jose. The captions always mentioned how excited my mother was to help Sierra plan. There was no mention of my news, no mention of wanting to be part of my day. One evening in May, Kai and I were eating dinner on the couch when my phone buzzed. Sierra's name lit up the screen. I answered because I still have that old habit of hoping. Her voice was full of energy. "So," she said, "Marlo and I finally locked down our engagement party date, July 27th. Perfect spot in Walnut Creek. Catered, rooftop, everything." I felt my stomach drop before she said it. "Isn't that the same weekend you picked?" she added. "But I figure you can move yours around since mine is already set." I held the phone a little tighter. "We set our date months ago," I said quietly. Sierra sighed. "Well, I cannot change mine. Everything is booked. It would really help if you shifted your ceremony. People can only do so much travel, and it's a bit much to ask them to drive up the coast for yours the same day." Before I could answer, she hung up with a quick, "Talk to Mom about this." Then the line clicked dead. I sat there staring at the dark screen. Kai put down his fork. "What happened?" I told him what Sierra had said. His shoulders stiffened. "She expects you to move the entire wedding." I nodded and tried to laugh, but it sounded thin. I felt 14 again, standing next to that lighthouse sketch I made for my birthday cake, only to watch it turn pink and glittery for Sierra's sake. 10 minutes later, my mother called. Her voice was smoother than Sierra's. Practiced. "Honey," she said, "I know you picked that date first, but your sister has a lot going on. Guests coming in, deposits paid. It's easier for you two to adjust than for her. You've always been independent. You don't need all this fuss." I closed my eyes. Independent. It had become her favorite word. A backhanded compliment and dismissal rolled into one. "Mom," I said, "it's my wedding. We're not moving it." She exhaled sharply. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." After she hung up, I felt something cold slide through me. It wasn't anger exactly. It was clarity, the kind that arrives when a pattern repeats itself so cleanly you can no longer pretend you misread it. 2 days later, another problem surfaced. Kai and I had been finalizing some design updates for the new current wing model when I noticed a schematic missing from our development folder. It eventually turned up, but in someone else's inbox. A small event tech company in San Jose had reached out asking clarifying questions about a file they thought we sent them. After speaking to their assistant, we realized the file had come from my father's email. Apparently, Sierra had asked him to help her gather inspiration for her engagement aesthetic. He must have forwarded the wrong folder. The fact that he had access at all was a leftover from the early days of Blue Current, when we were working out of my parents' garage and he occasionally helped us organize our cloud storage. He had never removed himself, and neither had I. When I called him, he sounded confused. I didn't think it was a big deal. He said, I was trying to help my sister. She needed ideas for a lighting display, and I thought you wouldn't mind. It's just engineering stuff. I felt a tightness build in my throat. Dad, that file was proprietary. It's not just engineering stuff. You can't forward things like that. He paused. I'm sure it's fine. You're overreacting. You're capable. You can fix it. There it was again. You can handle it, so we don't have to. When I hung up, Kai was pacing in the living room. This is serious, he said. That company could replicate half our design from what they saw. Talia joined us the next morning, eyes wide with frustration. We have to talk to legal. We cannot let this slide. As we sat around the dining table going through the damage, a strange calm settled in me. There was no fight left to give my family. Not over attention, not over fairness, not over accidents that kept costing me pieces of my life. That night I opened our wedding planning notebook and circled the date again. I kept it where it was. I didn't send a message to my mother or Sierra. I didn't explain or defend or negotiate. I simply accepted that they might not show up, that they might feel slighted or maybe even call me selfish. Kai came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my shoulders. Whatever you choose, I'm with you. I leaned back into him, grateful in a way I couldn't put into words. For once, I was not the only one carrying the weight of other people's expectations. When I finally closed the notebook, I felt something shift. A quiet resolve, the kind that settles deep and stays. I was done moving my life around to make room for people who would never do the same for me. Chapter 3. The House That Held Everything Back. The next week, I threw myself into the practical parts of planning a wedding, because logistics were easier than feelings. One night, Kai and I sat on the couch with my laptop between us, scrolling through rental listings along the Central Coast. Every venue that looked remotely magical came with a price tag that made my stomach clench. Kai nudged the screen with his finger. What about that one? It was not on any official venue site. It was a private listing for an old coastal estate south of Caramel, in a stretch of Big Sur where the cliffs dropped straight into the water. 3 photos, all slightly crooked. One showed a weathered house with peeling white paint. One showed a tiny lighthouse tower on the edge of the property, its windows boarded. The last one was a long shot of cliffs and a narrow strip of beach far below. I scrolled to the price and blinked. That has to be a typo. It has been on the market since 2022, Kai said. Says it was damaged in a storm in 2018. Maybe the owners want it off their hands. The more I read, the quieter I became. The house needed work, but the bones were solid. The listing mentioned a former artist's retreat, a private path to the shore, a caretaker who still lived in a small cottage out back. The price was low enough that if we drained most of our savings and used what was left from the grant, we could actually buy it, not just rent it for a weekend. Kai watched my face. You are thinking about it. I should be thinking this is insane, but you are not, he said softly. I imagined a table stretched along that cliff edge, surrounded by the 25 people who had chosen me, even when my own family did not. I imagined lights strung from that little lighthouse tower and the sound of the ocean drowning out every old story I had been given about who I was supposed to be. I called the number on the listing the next morning. The caretaker met us 2 days later. His name was Jonas Hale, late 60s with the sun-cracked face and careful eyes. He greeted us at the rusted gate and led us up an uneven stone path toward the house. The porch boards creaked under our feet, and the salt smell was stronger here than in Santa Cruz, as if the sea had decided this hillside belonged entirely to it. Storm took out half the railing a few winters back, Jonas said, touching one of the splintered posts. Owners live in Denver now. They stopped coming after the last slide cut off the lower road for a season. Place has been sitting quiet ever since. Inside, dust coated everything, but the high ceilings and wide windows felt like a promise. In the back, we found a narrow door that opened onto a small tower with spiral stairs. At the top was the retired lighthouse room, glass panes streaked with salt, the view so wide it made my chest hurt. Used to have painters and writers come through here, back in the 90s. People who needed a place to figure themselves out again. He glanced at me like he was checking whether that meant anything. It feels like somewhere you go after something breaks, I said. He smiled a little. Yeah, something like that. We walked the property in slow circles while Jonas told us stories about the last owner, a sculptor who had bought the estate to escape an ugly divorce, and about the storm in 2018 that slammed the waves so high they shook the windows. When he mentioned the boulder that had crashed through a section of deck and how they never quite got around to repairing it, I thought of all the small impacts that had cracked my own life, one at a time. By the time we reached the bottom of the path that led toward the overgrown stairs down to the beach, my mind had already leapt ahead. New railings, sanded floors, a long driftwood table facing the water, strings of light wrapped around that little tower. Kai must have seen it in my face. You want it, he said. I nodded, almost afraid to admit it out loud. I want something that no one handed me. I want something that is ours from the ground up. We made an offer the next week. It was lower than what the listing asked, but the Denver owners took it without a fight. Jonas called to tell us the news. Congratulations, he said. She's a good place, just needs someone to care about her again. I thanked him, then sat on the kitchen floor of our Santa Cruz apartment and laughed, shaking, until Kai pulled me into his arms. The work started as soon as the papers were signed. Every Friday, we drove south in Kai's truck, loaded with tools and secondhand supplies. Talia showed up most weekends with coffee and a cooler full of food, more excited about sanding and painting than any normal person should be. We replaced broken railings with hand-cut boards, sanding them until my palms blistered. We cleared the yard of weeds and rusted lawn furniture. Jonas taught us how to safely climb the narrow lighthouse stairs with crates of string lights and lanterns. On colder afternoons, we scraped old paint off the walls, while Ellie, who had decided to join the chaos, sat cross-legged on the floor with his guitar and tried to write a song that didn't sound like it belonged in a commercial. One afternoon, as I kneeled on the deck with a brush in my hand, the wind pushing my hair into my eyes, I found myself thinking about 2015. I had been a junior at Santa Barbara when I was offered a spot in a coastal research fellowship in Washington. It was the kind of program that opened doors, the kind professors talked about for years. I never made it there. The week I was supposed to confirm my attendance, Sierra called crying. She had a big audition in Los Angeles and no one else could drive her. Mom had a scheduling conflict. Dad refused to brave the freeway. Sierra said if she missed this chance, her whole career would be over. At the time, I believed her. I withdrew from the fellowship quietly. I drove 6 hours through traffic with Sierra sleeping in the passenger seat, her head tilted against the window while my chest felt hollow. The audition didn't turn into anything. The experience didn't even become a story she told often. It turned into nothing for her and a closed door for me. Standing on the deck now with paint on my jeans, I let myself feel the anger that memory still carried, but it didn't swallow me like it once would have. It mixed with something steadier, determination, a sense that I was finally building spaces that would not disappear the moment someone else demanded center stage. While we worked on the house, the legal situation back in Santa Cruz continued to shift. The event company that had received our design file hadn't just glanced at it and moved on. They had used elements of our layout in a pitch to one of their own clients. When our attorney Harper Quinn called with an update, her voice was sharp in that calm professional way that told me this was serious. They incorporated proprietary elements, she said. Enough that if you do nothing, you risk them claiming the design first. We need to act. I sat in the empty living room of the Big Sur house, phone pressed to my ear, watching dust swirl in a shaft of light. Do we know how much of the file they saw? Most of it, Harper replied. The email came from your father's account. I have copies. I'm not concerned about proving the origin. I'm concerned about timing. If they move faster than you, they could muddy the water. The old reflex rose in me, the one that wanted to shield my family at my own expense. I heard my father's confused voice in my head, the way he had said it wasn't a big deal. What happens if we pursue this? I asked. We send a formal complaint, demand they cease all use of your design, and if necessary, we file suit. It's straightforward.
but it will make things awkward with whoever forwarded that file in the first place. Meaning my father, meaning the people who already believed I should be the one to bend. That night at the house, after Kai and Talia had gone back to town for more supplies, I sat alone in the little lighthouse room. The boarded windows filtered the late afternoon into thin strips of light. I could hear the waves hitting the cliff below, the steady impact of water and rock. Kai called to check in. What did Harper say? She wants to file a complaint, I answered. I have to sign off. What do you want to do? I looked around at the space we were claiming, board by board, at the scaffold against the tower, at the fresh railings ready for stain. I thought about every time I had chosen family peace over my own future and how it had never once been returned. I think, I said slowly, I'm done pretending things are fine when they're not. If we don't protect what we built, no one will. There was a long pause on the line. I'm with you, Kai said, all the way. The next morning, I drove back to Santa Cruz and sat in Harper's office while she printed out the complaint papers. My hands barely shook as I signed. It wasn't the drama of filing. It was the quiet shift under my skin, the knowledge that for the first time, I was choosing to stand on the side of the life I was building instead of the people who kept chipping away at it. When I stepped out onto the sidewalk, the sky over the bay was pale and clear. For a brief second, I imagined the old version of myself turning around, going back upstairs to ask Harper to wait, to give my family another chance. That version felt far away now, like a photograph that had already started to fade.
Chapter 4. The Two Celebrations. The weeks after signing the complaint blurred into a rhythm of sawdust and email threads. During the day, I split my time between the Santa Cruz office and Harper's updates, and on weekends, we drove south to Big Sur to turn the broken estate into a place that could hold a wedding. The table came first. Kai was convinced that if we could build a table, the rest would fall into place. We spent an entire Saturday walking the high tide line, dragging in long pieces of driftwood that looked sturdy enough. My shoulders ached and my palms were raw by the time we loaded the last plank into the truck. Arya watched us stack the wood in the yard. You two are out of your minds, she said, but she was smiling. In a good way, mostly. It has to be from here, I told her, if this place is going to be our start. We sanded each board until the grain rose smooth and pale, then Kai joined them across the frame he had measured 3 times. When we finally flipped the finished top onto its legs, it stretched almost the entire length of the deck, 18 feet of salt-stained history, ready for plates and hands and laughter. Talia had tracked down a glass artist in Monterey who still blew lanterns by hand. One afternoon, he delivered a crate of imperfect globes, each one a little different. Some held tiny bubbles like trapped air from another world. We stood in the lighthouse room unpacking them, the late light catching on the glass. These look like they have already seen things, Talia said. Perfect, just like us. We ran strings of wire from the railings to the tower so we could hang the lanterns over the table. At night, we tested them with cheap bulbs, watching the warm circles of light pool across the wood. For the first time in my life, the center of the scene was something I had built for myself. While we were putting our wedding together board by board, my mother was curating a different kind of event. I learned about it in pieces. A forwarded invitation for Sierra and Marlowe's engagement party at a rooftop venue in La Jolla. A group text from an aunt apologizing in advance that she would not be able to make our ceremony because my mother had already booked her to help with place cards in Southern California. When I called that aunt privately, she lowered her voice. Your mom is really pushing everyone to go down there, she said. She keeps saying you are keeping things small and you will understand. The old ache in my chest stirred, but I caught it before it could grow. I do understand, I said. Better than she thinks. Word drifted back to me that a cousin who had said she wanted to come to our wedding was now being called disloyal in the family group chat. I did not ask to see the messages. I knew how they would read. Dramatic, selfish, ungrateful.
It was the same vocabulary that had hovered over me for years, ready to stick to any version of me that did not bend the way they wanted. In the middle of that, Harper called with a new development. The event company that had used our design sent a letter through their own counsel. They offered a small settlement and a promise to stop using our layout if we agreed not to pursue any claims. When Harper read the amount to me, I let out a short laugh. "That does not even cover the parts we bought for the prototype," I said. "They're hoping you're tired, that you'll take the check and walk away." I looked at the photos on my desk, printouts of the estate before and after we had started working. The new railings, the table, the lanterns, all the work we had done with our own hands. "I am not tired," I said. "I am angry. That's different." "Good. Then we keep going." We declined the offer. Harper moved forward with the complaint, mapping out next steps in a calm voice that helped ground me. For the first time, the word justice did not feel like something that belonged to other people. As July approached, the house shifted from construction site to something like a home. Jonas helped us shore up the path down to the small overlook where we planned to stand for the ceremony. Eli brought a portable speaker and tested the acoustics while he strummed chords. "This place has its own echo," he said. "You don't even need a sound system. The cliffs do half the work." The night before the wedding, the 5 of us sat around the driftwood table without decorations, just takeout boxes and mismatched chairs. The lanterns glowed overhead. The air smelled like sawdust and the ocean. "You ready for tomorrow?" Kai asked me quietly. I looked at the empty seats. They were already filled in my mind with faces that had shown up for me when it cost them something. There was space for Arya, for Eli, for Talia, for Jonas, for mentors who believed in Blue Current, for Nana if she felt strong enough to make the drive. There was no designated spot for my parents or for Sierra. If they came, they would find their own way to fit, or they wouldn't. I was done shaping myself around their absences. "I'm ready," I said, "whatever that ends up meaning." While we were stringing last-minute garlands along the railing, Arya started taking pictures on her phone. She caught the way the lantern's light bounced off the table, the way Kai laughed with his head thrown back, the way I stood in the doorway without realizing I was smiling. "These are insane," she said. "I'm posting." She tagged Blue Current in the caption and added a few words about restoring old places and starting again. Within an hour, friends from Santa Cruz and Santa Barbara were commenting. One of them, who worked for a climate nonprofit, shared the post with a note about sustainable celebrations. Eli uploaded a short video of us rehearsing the walk from the house to the cliff edge, the ocean behind us, the caption talking about love and sea level rise in the same breath. I set my phone face down on the table after watching the notifications multiply. It felt too strange, the idea that people I barely knew were seeing this new life while my own family pretended it wasn't happening. In La Jolla, on that same evening, Sierra's engagement party space was being staged under white string lights on a rooftop that overlooked the harbor. I only know these details because people later described them to me. Shimmering backdrop, endless champagne, a table full of favors stamped with her and Marlowe's initials. My mother moving between groups of guests with the polished smile she wore at work, assuring everyone that this was the event of the summer. On the morning of our wedding, the sky over Big Sur was clear, not a guarantee in July, which felt like its own kind of blessing. I woke to the sound of waves and the soft murmur of voices downstairs as Kai and Eli made coffee. Talia knocked on my door holding a garment bag and a roll of emergency tape. "It's game day," she said. "Ready to be an ocean bride?" Halfway through getting dressed, my phone buzzed with a string of messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Students I had mentored, a collaborator from Monterey, a former professor. They had all seen Arya's post or Eli's video. They were sending love, calling the place beautiful, saying how right it looked to see me framed by the cliffs instead of cropped out. I set my phone down again before the mix of gratitude and grief could overwhelm me. Today wasn't about who wasn't there. It was about everyone who was. We held the ceremony at the overlook above the beach. The cliffs fell away on either side, the water flashing white far below. Jonas stood discreetly near the back, arms folded, watching like he was seeing the house fulfill a promise he had been keeping for someone. When Kai shook my hands, I felt more grounded than I ever had. Our vows were simple, no theatrics, just the two of us promising to keep choosing each other, even when the tide pulled hard. Afterward, we walked back up to the deck where the table waited. Lantern light swayed gently above it. Plates crowded together, glasses full, hands reaching across for bread and for each other. People laughed, talked over one another, leaned close to hear stories. I moved through it all in a kind of stunned awareness, every sense sharp. At some point, Arya hissed my name and tugged me toward the corner of the deck where Eli was staring at his phone, eyes wide. "Do you know what's happening?" she asked. I shook my head. Eli turned the screen so I could see. The rehearsal video he had posted had been picked up by an environmental account with a huge following. They were talking about love and climate resilience and using our table as the image. Thousands of likes, comments from strangers saying they were crying, saying they felt seen, saying they had never thought of weddings that way. Notifications were stacked on top of one another. Someone had pulled a screenshot and posted it to a wedding blog. Another person had tagged a sustainability magazine. The story was rippling outward in real time. While that was happening on our cliff, a very different mood settled over the rooftop in La Jolla. Later, one of my cousins would tell me that halfway through Sierra's party, guests began glancing down at their phones. Little pockets of silence opened up among the clusters of small talk as people watched the same video we were looking at. A few of the younger cousins recognized me immediately. So did one of my clients. The music kept playing, but the energy shifted. The attention, which my mother had worked so hard to center on Sierra and Marlo, drifted somewhere up the coast. I didn't see my mother's face in that moment, only heard about it. How she went still with the champagne flute in her hand. How Sierra's smile strained at the edges. How Marlo muttered something about timing and optics. On our deck, no one mentioned any of that yet. We just sat at the long table, passing dishes and clinking glasses. For the first time in my life, I felt myself fully inside the frame of an important day, not pressed to the edge,
Not cut out afterward. Every time I looked up, someone I loved was looking back at me, not past me. When the sun dropped into the ocean and the lanterns became the only light, Eli started playing the half-finished song he had written. People hummed along even though they did not know the words. At the far end of the table, Kai caught my eye, his expression soft and sure. The laughter rose and fell around us, blending with the sound of the waves hitting the cliff below. For once, nothing felt borrowed or shared on someone else's terms. The night belonged to us. Chapter 5. The Tide That Turned. Morning light in Big Sur hits different. It slid in through the uncurtained windows, soft and salt-tinged, and for a few seconds I thought I was still dreaming. Then my back reminded me I had fallen asleep in a chair, and my feet reminded me I had danced barefoot on a wooden deck until my legs shook. Outside, the ocean kept doing what it always did, rolling in and out, completely uninterested in human drama. The lanterns were still hanging over the table, some of them burned out, some flickering like they were reluctant to let go of the night. Empty glasses sat in front of half-pushed-back chairs. Someone had left the jacket on the railing. Napkins were crumpled like small, tired flags. Kai stepped out onto the deck carrying 2 mugs. His hair was a mess, and his tie was gone. "You look wrecked," he said. I took the coffee and looked around. It is a good wrecked. We moved slowly through the mess, stacking plates, gathering silverware. Every footprint on the deck felt like proof that it had really happened. I found a sprig of rosemary someone had tucked behind a glass, and for a second, for no reason I could name, my throat tightened. This house had been empty for years. Now its first morning after a celebration felt like a deep breath. My phone was on the table where I had left it. The battery had survived the night. A lot of notifications waited. I skimmed a few. Messages from people I loved, people I barely knew, strangers who had seen a photo or video and somehow felt something real from it. Then I flipped the phone over again. I did not want the outside world to pull me away from the sound of Kai rinsing dishes in the sink, from the smell of coffee and sea air. Around mid-morning, after Arya and Eli arrived to help and we had made a dent in the cleanup, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call, not a text. The screen showed my mother's number. I watched it ring twice before I answered and walked away from the deck so no one would feel like they had to pretend not to listen. "Hi, Mom." She sounded tired and too bright at the same time. "Hi, honey. How are you feeling? Big night. I saw all the posts. Very pretty out there." Pretty. The word sat between us. "I am tired," I said. "Happy." There was a pause. "Listen," she began. "There has been a lot of talk, and I feel like maybe you are upset about how things worked out yesterday, with the parties. People had already committed. You know how complicated schedules can be. Your sister, she has a lot of eyes on her right now, and we were trying to make sure everything went smoothly. You have always been so independent. We thought you did not need a big turnout, that you would understand." There it was again, that word. For years, it had landed like a compliment I wasn't sure I wanted. This time it sounded exactly like what it was, an excuse wrapped in something softer. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I do understand. I understand that every time there is a conflict, I'm the flexible one. I'm the one who moves. I'm the one whose thing becomes optional." She rushed in. "That is not fair. We came to your school concerts. We supported you. You know we love you. We just—" "You cut me out of a family photo," I interrupted quietly. "You changed my birthday cake. You ignored the science fair. You told relatives to skip my wedding. You forwarded my work to strangers. I know you think those are small things, but they add up. They have always added up." Silence followed. I could hear her breathing. "We did the best we could," she said eventually. "Maybe you did," I said, "but your best hurt me, and I need you to know that." I could feel my heartbeat everywhere, in my fingers, in my throat. "I am not shutting you out," I went on. "I am not slamming a door. But I am not going to keep shrinking my life so it fits inside your schedule. If you want to be in it, it's going to have to be as people who show up because they want to, not because it's convenient, not because you think I can handle the disappointment." She drew in a breath like she might argue. Then she exhaled long and low. "I don't know what to say to that," she murmured. "You don't have to say anything right now. Just sit with it." We stayed on the line for a few more seconds, and for the first time, I felt like I wasn't the one scrambling to smooth everything out. When we hung up, my hands were shaking, but it was a clean tremor, almost like adrenaline after a long run. Later that afternoon, my phone rang again. Sierra's name appeared on the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail. Instead, I walked down toward the edge of the property where you could see the stairs dropping toward the hidden beach and answered. "Hey," I said. Her voice was quieter than I expected. "Hey." For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear noise behind her, clinking dishes, muted conversation. Maybe she was still in La Jolla. Maybe she had already moved on to the next party. I saw the photos and the video, the table, the lights. It looked real. "It was real," I said. Another pause. Everyone at the party watched it, kind of killed the mood. I almost said sorry. The reflex sat on my tongue. I swallowed it. "That wasn't my intention." "I know," she said quickly. She cleared her throat. "Elora, did you ever need me?" The question hung heavy, unexpected. For a second, I was back in the car in 2015, hands on the wheel, her asleep in the passenger seat while I drove away from an opportunity that might have changed my life. Yes, I did. A lot of times. She made a small sound, like maybe she was bracing for impact. "And?" she asked.
Did I ever actually show up? Not in the ways I needed, I answered. You came to some things, you made me laugh when we were younger, but when it really mattered, it was always you in the center and me holding the camera. That's a harsh way to put it, she said, but her voice didn't have its usual edge. It sounded more like she was talking to herself than to me. I'm not saying that to hurt you, I told her. I'm saying it because it's true, and I'm tired of pretending it's not. She sighed. They all said you would take yesterday better than me, that you would be fine, that you always land on your feet. For a long time, I said slowly, their definition of fine just meant I didn't cause trouble. I don't want that version of fine anymore. We let the silence stretch between us. The wind from the water tugged at my hair. I don't know how to fix any of this, she said. Maybe you don't start by fixing it. Maybe you start by seeing it, really seeing it. We didn't resolve anything miraculous on that call. There were no sudden apologies that rewrote the past. But when we hung up, I felt something loosen. Not a reconciliation, not yet. Just the smallest shift in the story we had both been reciting for years. A few weeks later, Harper called with the outcome of our legal fight. I was in the Santa Cruz office, laptop open, code half finished. Good news first, she said. They folded. The company signed a settlement acknowledging your ownership. They have to destroy any copies of your design and pay a proper damages amount. And we got language that credits Blue Current publicly for the concept. I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. And the investor, she added. I blinked. What investor? Graham Porter. He saw the coverage about your case and the way your wedding post blew up in the climate space. Reached out, said he might have misjudged you and wanted to talk about coming on board now that you're gaining traction. I thought of his face that day in the glass conference room, how he had looked past me to speak to Kai, the way he had called me a nice sign that more women were taking an interest in STEM. I asked Harper to forward his email anyway. When I read it, the language was smooth, full of respect that had not been there when I was 21. We drafted a reply with Kai and Talia's help. We thanked him for his interest. We outlined terms that included equitable representation, explicit authority for me as a technical lead, and support for internships targeting young women in engineering. We sent it and waited to see if he would agree to meet us on level ground or drift away to the next easy bet. Whatever he chose, it didn't feel like my world hinged on his approval anymore. By the time late summer settled over the coast, the lawsuit was behind us. Blue Current was busier than ever, and the Big Sur house felt less like a project and more like a living place. We decided to host a small dinner for the people who had carried us through the strangest season of my life. Arya and Eli drove down early with bags of groceries. Talia arrived with desserts and a stack of mismatched candles. Kai lit the lanterns. Jonas brought a bottle of something he said he had been saving for when the house finally felt like it belonged to someone again. Before anyone else sat down, I tied a white ribbon around the back of one chair and left it empty. No one asked right away. They just glanced at it and seemed to understand that it meant something. Halfway through the meal, Nana Ruth arrived. It had taken her longer to make the drive, and she refused to let anyone else pick her up. When she stepped onto the deck, leaning on her cane, the conversation paused and then swelled around her. She hugged me so tight I could feel her ribs. You did it, she whispered. You made a place no one can cut you out of. Later, she pulled a small envelope from her bag. Inside was a photo from 2008. The original version of the Christmas picture that had hung on my parents' mantle, the one that had always shown just my parents and Sierra. In this copy, I was there, shoulders straight, eyes a little unsure, but undeniably present. I set it at the center of the table, next to the candles, in front of the empty chair with the white ribbon. That chair, I said when Arya finally asked, it is for the girl who thought she had to wait to be invited. She deserves a seat, even if she showed up late. No one laughed. They just nodded, quietly, like it made perfect sense. After everyone left and the house fell quiet again,
I washed dishes in the dim kitchen light. My phone buzzed where it was charging on the counter. A single new message. From Sierra. There was no text, only an image. Another photo I recognized from the cropped versions my mother had kept. A summer picnic in 2008 at the park near our old house. In the cut version, it had always been Sierra in the middle, holding a sparkler, my parents on either side, just enough background to prove it was outside. In the version on my phone, uncropped, I was sitting cross-legged on the blanket in front of them, laughing at something off camera, a streak of sunlight across my hair. I stared at it for a long time. No caption, no apology, just a different kind of proof. I did not reply that night. There would be time later,